Since the 1950s, the Chinese government has released 5-year plans, a roadmap that guides social and economic development for a period of, 5 years. The current plan, which covers 2026 to 2030, attaches great importance to innovation as the primary force behind the Chinese economy. To highlight China's push to achieve advanced scientific and technological development, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited a high-tech park in Beijing. At the park, Chinese President Xi Jinping was briefed about IT applications and Beijing's efforts to speed up the development of an international innovation center. The president saw a display of sci-tech innovations and talked with researchers and heads of enterprises. The park was built in 2019 to coordinate resources and accelerate the shift of scientific breakthroughs from laboratory to industry. It occupies an area of 1.7 million square meters and is home to over 90% of China's leading IT firms, hosting about 1,000 companies. Time to go deeper into this 5-year plan and the strategy outlined by the Chinese government. For that, we welcome Lanxin Xiang. He is Chair Professor at East China Normal University. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, China has released this 15th 5-year plan. It was released back in October, and it will be formally approved next month during the 2 sessions meetings. This 5-year plan focuses very sharply towards technology and innovation. So break that down for us. What are the main goals, and how do you see this plan unfold over the next 5 years?
Well, this is an extremely ambitious 5-year plan. I think compare with all previous 5-year plans, the major distinction is this is not a normal one, which means it does not talk very much about the normal economic activities or traditional. The focus is really mostly focusing on innovation, R&D, technology, and also very important part of it is economic security. Okay. So this is where I think it's totally different. This is it's a new version of a 5-year plan. Yes.
So when you talk about the focus on economic security, what does that mean in practice?
Well, basically means 2 sides, obviously. One is high tech, the AI and so on. China needs what they call self-reliance. This is clearly a reaction to what the United States has done. Some kind of technological blockade, if you will, against China. And so China began to feel China has to pursue a self-reliant strategy to be able to secure its advancement, or the leading potential leading position in the high tech. Now, the other element, the second element, of course, is supply chain security. So this is, I think, where you get your stuff. Either the globalization, the free trade concept, pretty much thrown out the window, at least for now, under the Trump administration. Yeah.
Now, of course, technology covers a wide range of disciplines. It ranges from green technology to space technology to AI, as you pointed out. So where do you see the most investment going?
I would see most investment go to AI, go to robotic technology. I would say mostly relate to innovative or new type of manufacturing trend, or Chinese basically called new quality, the productive force. That's what Chinese language. So these will be the major focus. But the other area as well, I think, space, for example, I'm sure pharmaceutical and many other area as well. But the main part is the cutting edge high-tech information technology. chips and so on. Yes.
Right, and if we look at China's research and development investment, it surpassed the average in OECD economies for the first time in 2025. The OECD countries, of course, comprises those 38 countries, mostly developed nations with high-income economies. How significant is the fact that China passed by these countries in terms of R&D?
Well, it's crucially important, obviously, because China, I'll say 10 years ago, the world hasn't even realized Chinese advancement in the technology, particularly the recent technologies. But only last year, I think they have, over the last couple of years, they have seen a few shocks, and they become really alarmed. And then they began, you see, this is also a defensive act to be able to pursue a strategy that will no longer depending on the international market law. So this is, I think, it's a similar strategy like in 1950s, the 60s, when China is really under the Western economic comprehensive blockade. That at that time, the Chinese leader proposed self-reliance as the leading principle of Chinese economic development. This is the second time in my memory they pursue self-reliance economic development strategy. So this is a crucially important event. Yes.
The document also talks about strengthening social welfare and living standards in China as well. I mean, how important is that for China aiming to be a mid-level developed country by 2035?
Well, that of course is this of course is important not only because the China is facing so many challenges in the social economic challenges. So I think China this is a real challenge, of course, for the leadership is you want to have a high-tech, innovative economy. At the same time, you have to expect the job situation may not be easy for you to improve, as every country, advanced country knows that. Automation kill a lot of jobs. Okay, so the contradiction would be you want to have a good social welfare, try to promote good life for people, but then how you have to square with a rapid increase of the income in their pockets. So that is a job related and also relate to demographic the situation which China is moving into a danger zone just at the moment. So they have to design a social welfare system.
If we look at the past year of the Trump administration, this administration has adopted some very hostile policies, trade policies, towards not just its allies, but its rivals as well. We've seen the tariff regime that the Trump administration has adopted. And in a sense, we've also seen a major change in global trade relationships. I mean, if you look at China, there are many leaders from around the world who've made their way to Beijing, the King of Spain, the presidents of France, South Korea. We've also had the prime ministers of Finland, Ireland, Canada, and the United Kingdom. And more recently, we had the leader of Uruguay go to China. To what do you attribute this global change that we're seeing right now? Are countries looking for a more stable partner? And is the United States being increasingly seen as a more unreliable, erratic partner?
There is no doubt the United States become unreliable and erratic. But for China, it's also creates some element of stability. This is unique, I would say, only between China and the United States, both in economic terms. That is the geopolitical thinking on the side of Washington's shifted so dramatically. You see, this is important. Trade war is one thing. Okay, but ideological war is another. That is Cold War style ideological rivalry, considered China being the leading threat because of its political system. Now, that thinking is gone now, or more or less, at least for Mr. Trump. So for China, this is actually an extremely important stabilizing element. Therefore, negotiation over trade become relatively easier. I would say relatively between U.S. and China, but it's not the same, of course, between U.S. and other countries, including allies and the friends, because Trump is fighting this, launching this trade war almost indiscriminately, because he thought the allies rip off United States, perhaps no less than China. Sometimes he would say he wants a regime change. It's not about Russia and China. Mr. Vance said publicly, it's the Europeans, the EU countries need to have a regime change because they're liberal ruling elite. So this is, I think, is a very, very interesting moment for China and for U.S.-China relations. We have negative side, of course, but I would think mostly so far it's a very positive relationship. The erratic side of Trump does not undermine U.S.-China relationship as compared with the U.S. allies. Now, the U.S. allies you mentioned visiting China now, Canadians and so on, they are on the course of correction because in the past few years, particularly I think Canada and the EU countries, major EU countries, they miscalculate several things. They misread Trump. They think Trump presidency after the first Trump administration is just a one-off thing. It's not going to come back. They don't believe Trump is going to come back.
Yeah.
They don't take Trump's. Second, they don't take Trump's self-claimed revolution. Trump says, "I want to have a common sense revolution." They refuse to take him seriously. The third thing is they think the EU countries, Canadians, they can using this tough policy on China as a foundation of strengthening a relationship with the United States. This is what cultivated by Biden administration. I think is misguided anyway, so-called Democratic Alliance concept. It's an ideological war against China. So the Europeans, Canadians, they jump on that ship prematurely. Now they regret enormously. They realize they're wrong.
Okay, so that's where we have to leave it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Later this year, China will host the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Shenzhen. The city is considered China's Silicon Valley, and this choice of venue underscores a push for digital innovation. To continue our conversation about China's 15th five-year plan, we welcome from Beijing Zoon Ahmed Khan. She is a research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. And here in the United States, from Portland in Oregon, Liang is chair professor in economics at Willamette University. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Zoon, as we just discussed, this five-year plan, which was released in October, focuses on scientific and technological progress, and it does that in support of what has been termed Chinese-style modernization. So put that into perspective for us. How would you define Chinese-style modernization?
Thank you, Anand, firstly, for having me. And, this five-year plan, like every five-year plan since 1953, will have significant impact on the strategic direction and also the deliverables really set, the targets set by the government. For me, especially coming from a global south perspective, it's first of all very important to recognize that China's, emphasis on Chinese style modernization also comes from this erroneous mindset that was imposed on developing countries that there's only one way of modernization, which is the Western way of modernization. And as such, developing countries or the third world are in the waiting room of history. But as we have seen, with consistent planning, with a long-term vision, with the ability the capacity and the focus to execute that vision, China has demonstrated to the world that their own unique way, with Chinese characteristics, socialism with Chinese characteristics, not only delivers results, but actually has taken China very far, especially in the last few decades. So in a nutshell, I think Chinese-style modernization focuses on, an overarching perspective where it's a people-centric approach. China is focusing on resilience in this 5-year plan. China is focusing on the ability to produce, technological advancement and becoming more independent as a country, given the global uncertainties. Chinese-style modernization also focuses on reducing the existing gaps, which is not a perspective taken by so-called Western democracies or the Western modernization template. And I think Chinese-style modernization also focuses on, it's very receptive to the changing realities. For instance, in this 5-year plan, we see a great emphasis also on the silver economy. We see, which is also, an aging population. How do you, instead of making that a burden, how do you capitalize on the changing realities? How do you transform your strategic vision and the priorities, the agenda set to make sure that changing realities are not only catered to, but also addressed and become an opportunity, really, essentially, for the economy. And then I think one of the most important aspects of this 5-year plan is the new quality productive forces, which is really, in more emerging from China being the manufacturing hub of the world. Now China is going to utilize AI, emerging technologies, really invest in people in the sense that how do we essentially make sure that we are investing in people's skills and people's abilities to, be essentially, an asset when it comes to the changing realities of the country and the world at large.
Right.
So, first of all, I think it's a unique way, very with critical thinking, not only a top-down approach, but also an approach that's going to be every year assessed based on changing realities and also feedback from experts, from frontliners, etc.
Liang, of course, this plan focuses on innovation, but it's not some sort of obscure, abstract enterprise. I mean, it is linked to real-world transformation, innovation and technology advancements that can be readily used in factories and societies. I mean, Beijing is looking at these strategies to spur growth through technology. So make that link for us and how this plan and its focus on technology and innovation actually fits into the country's growth trajectory.
Yeah, good to be with you, Anand, and Zoom. So I think, as a matter of fact, the most important objective when it comes to really shore up the real economy to develop the so-called high-level development, the first thing is to upgrade the so-called traditional industries, right? So I think that is very clear that China, on the one hand, does want to have those technological breakthroughs and continue to innovate. But on the other hand, very importantly, is to integrate these general purpose technologies like AI, like Internet of Things, into the traditional industries like manufacturing, light industries, mining, chemicals, and so on and so forth, to really boost the overall economy. So really promote the high quality productive forces, as Zoom mentioned, to really promote the so-called, total factor productivity. Because again, I think China identified a few emerging industries like new energies, new materials, and also low altitude economies, as well as future economies such as quantum computing, brain-computer connections, AI, and so on. But again, the purpose is to really leverage these high tech and to promote the broader economic growth. And I think a very salient example is also in fintech, right? China makes it very clear that any financial innovation needs to serve the real economy, not for any speculative purposes. So I think this is overall a brilliant strategy because, again, on the one hand, it's important to boost the overall economy through these general purpose technologies. And on the other hand, I think this is really China's unique advantage, right? China is still relatively behind when it comes to, from the 0 to 1 kind of technological breakthroughs. But China has this really complete industrial supply chain, the very mature industrial, clusterings, over 200, right, complete industrial supply chains. And so that is really China's advantage. China is accounting for over 30% of the global manufacturing capacity. So, injecting all these technologies and really boost productivity in this advanced manufacturing sector, I think that would really become a sustainable force for China going forward. And one last thing to add, and I think that China is also really focusing on the sustainable development and inclusive development. And I think that are really important, to China's unique development path.
Zoon, this plan has been described as a departure from the business as usual model that we have seen in the past. And the reason for that is because in the past 5 years, for instance, we've seen that the world has changed considerably. It's become a less or a more unpredictable environment. Does this point to Chinese self-sufficiency and independence?
I think the purpose, again, as I mentioned, and I think also Liang's intervention also mentions that there is a very strategic vision. One of the reasons, there's a lot of comparisons made by why is it that China's 5-year plans are successful? How is it that China is meeting those targets? It's also because we are seeing a more strategic development vision. And with that, I think one of the things to recognize with this 5-year plan is that China very openly in the draft that we have seen, obviously the final report, the plan will be published a while from now. But in the draft, we see that there is acute acknowledgement of the changing global realities. We know that right now, especially with Trump's second term, there is going to be a massive impact on the global economy, on global supply chains. This has, as you mentioned, induced new kinds of uncertainties. And additionally, China also domestically acknowledges the challenges. And with that, there is a recognition that we will need to, as a nation, really address these, not only the domestic challenges, but also the global realities that are shaping up. I think, given the current scenario, one of the things that really stands out in this 5-year plan is that now China says, they're going to emerge as leaders. And not only leaders when it comes to, I think there's an increased focus on global South cooperation, increased focus on creating new avenues of cooperation, given that existing networks are being targeted. We also see that only this year, 2026, a lot of so-called, Washington's allies are also coming towards China because they see that China has a long-term vision, a perspective that means China is not only open to, but also capable of needed leadership, guidance, and stability. But at the same time, this is a country which will definitely play a part in trying to, connect those or address those challenges that we are facing. So I think with that, with this strategic blueprint, we also see that China is not only demonstrating a vision for development that is sustainable. The green development vision is also, a priority, a focus, the people-centric vision, and reducing the gap between urban and rural populations, creating new avenues of, productivity, even in those rural areas that are sort of, lagging behind in certain ways. But at the same time, all of this is also an opportunity for the world to realize that this is a country that is not only setting an example, but also is willing and keen to assume a leadership position. So I think definitely there are uncertainties, there are challenges, but given that China is very receptive, very aware, and also increasingly becoming well prepared, becoming more resilient as opposed to just growth. Mm-hmm. The focus now is on resilience. That is because we have uncertainties that need to be catered to, that need to be understood and need to be addressed. So I think this independence that China talks about now when it comes to technological advancement, investing in people, new quality productive forces, etc., green development, green energy, all of that is also, spearheaded or further, galvanized given the realities that we are facing.
And Liang, as this plan is being inaugurated, let's take a look at the state of the Chinese economy. It's looking good. I mean, it did meet its target of 5% growth for 2025, and it posted a record trade surplus of $1.2 trillion. So How does that fit into the new 5-year plan and the state's plan to grow its economy even further?
Well, I think that economic context is very important, as you mentioned. I think, as a matter of fact, in the past 14th 5-year plan, the last 5 years, China has really overcome a lot of challenges, right? Be it pandemic or, the technological sort of bottleneck imposed by the United States or the trade war. I think China really came out really strong and resilient. So I think this new 5-year plan really continue to set the objectives, right? Like what it has done in the past, which is to strive for high quality development, high quality productive forces, and to realize, like you said earlier, self-reliance on technology. Now, I think this is not only in terms of coping with the risks, right? The uncertainties, the vulnerabilities, but also I think China sees it as an opportunity. For example, China is able to, innovate in the new energy vehicles, and that really gives China sort of overtaking, right, the traditional automobile sort of technologies. So I think with these new technology sort of emerging industries, China sees a lot of opportunities. And of course, I think this is also very important for China's sustainable productivity-driven growth going forward, because back in the 2000s, the Chinese leaders already lament on, China has to export 800 million T-shirts to exchange for one airplane. So I think you mentioned this 1.2 trillion export surplus. And I think, again, not only the size is remarkable, but also really important is the structural upgrading, right? The trade structure improvements that China has able to now export a lot of relatively high-tech products, right? The mechanical electronic products account for over 60% of its exports. And these high-tech products' export growth is much larger than overall output growth, export growth. So again, overall, I think the emphasis of this the 15th 5-year plan, on the one hand, really again emphasizes on technological innovations, upgrading traditional industries, and second is really to boost domestic demand, and that is both investment and consumption. Because I think we have seen that the last quarter of last year, the growth somewhat slowed down a little bit, and largely I think due to the investment slowdown. So I think this new 5-year plan will really emphasize a lot more on how to boost domestic demand, both in terms of investments. We already see a lot of mega sort of infrastructure projects are being rolled out. The government has already in early 2026 budgeted $43 billion for some of these important infrastructure projects. And I think again going forward, there will be a good synergy, right, in terms of boosting domestic demand and also at the same time continue to achieve the kind of technological breakthroughs and industrial upgrading.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Liang, Zoon, Ahmed, thanks to both of you for being with us.